terms. To factor it, the first thing you need to do is decide how can it be factored. If it's a binomial, it's one of two ways: factor by GCF or factor a difference of two squares. This one is definitely not a difference of two squares because it's not a difference at all, it's a sum. So you take each of the terms and you list out their factors. To get 2x, isn't that just 2 times x? And to get 6, isn't that just 2 times 3? So what do they have in common? A 2. So that is their GCF, so you factor it out. You're basically like undistributing it, and that's called factoring. Now, from the 2x term, x was not used in the GCF, and from 6, 3 was not used. And then just bring down the plus. And then that has been factored now by pulling out the greatest common factor of 2. And the reason I can quickly look at it and know that it's right is because 2 times x is 2x, 2 times 3 is 6. Yes, Travis? Okay. Like, the way you did it, you just looked at it and knew the GCF was 2? But you only can do that way when you're dealing with a ax squared plus bx plus c. Look, I don't think that method is going to work for this next binomial. Okay, so now let's look at this one. It is a difference, but this is not a difference of two squares because this is not a perfect square. 25 is a perfect square, but 5 is not. So you're also going to factor this one by finding the GCF. So you take each of the terms and you write out their factors. 5 times x times x times x would make that 5x cubed. And then 25x squared is 5 times 5 times x times x. Now you circle what they have in common. They have a 5 in common, they have an x in common, and they have another x in common. And a 5, an x, and an x is a GCF of 5x squared. Because 5 times x is 5x squared. Now what they did not have in common is what remains. And that was an x and a 5, and then you just bring down the minus sign, and then you're done. Now the way I know that this is correct is because 5x squared times x is 5x cubed. 5x squared times negative 5 is negative 25x squared. Alright, number 3. Say that you didn't recognize this right away as a difference of two squares, which it is. You could attempt to do it the way that we've been doing it. You could write down 4x squared and you could write down 81. 4x squared is a 2 times 2 times x times x. 81 is a 9 times 9, which is really just 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Do they have anything in common to circle? No, which means this is not a GCF problem. There's no greatest common factor. This is a difference of two squares because you're subtracting two terms that are each perfect squares. Those are factored into two binomials, and then you just say what times itself would produce 4x squared? 2x times 2x. And then what times itself would produce 81? 9 times 9. But to get a negative 81, opposite signs. Basically, all you're doing once you recognize that it's a difference of two squares, you're just square rooting each of the terms. Okay, the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 81 is 9, and those are the two things you fill in, but they have to have opposite signs so that they'll make a negative 81 and so that the middle will cancel out. Think about it. 2x times negative 9 and positive 9 times 2x will cancel each other out, correct? Which is why it goes straight from x squared to no x at all. The middle term is missing because it canceled out. Any questions so far? Okay, put down your pencil for a second, and I am going to recap what we've been learning so far. We started trinomials yesterday. The first two type of trinomials we learned are at the top. Here's a trinomial in standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c, but the a value is a 1. When the a value is 1, factoring it is pretty simple. All you do is make the two binomials. To get x squared, you do x times x, and then to get the rest, you just think of two numbers. The two numbers have to multiply to make your c value, which is 10, and add to make your b value, which is 7. And those two numbers are positive 5 and positive 2. Because think about it. If you were to double distribute, x times x is where you get the x squared. 5 times 2 is where you get the 10. And then when you do the outer terms, you get a 2x. The inner terms make a 5x, combined a 7x. So whenever the a value is 1, it's simple. You just write the two binomials that would create that trinomial. To do that, two numbers that multiply to your c value and add to your b value. Yes? Okay, now, it gets a little harder when your a value is no longer 1. Now our a value is a 4. As soon as you see that your a value is not a 1, the first thing you need to see is if it will divide out of all three terms. Will 4 divide out of all three? Yes. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. And negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. Since that will occur, that means 4 is your GCF, and you factor it out. Then you write what's remaining. That leaves just a positive 1x squared. That leaves a negative 1x, and this becomes a negative 2. Now, don't we have a trinomial with an a value of 1 again? So you can factor it like we did this one. Look for two numbers that multiply to a negative 2, your c value, and add to negative 1, your b value. Correct. And then that's the answer for this one. Today we're going to learn what to do when your a value is not 1 and when it cannot divide out of all three terms evenly. Like that would become a 1, but that would be a decimal, and so would that. So you cannot do this one the way we did that one. There's no GCF. I'm about to teach you a new method to solve it, or to factor a trinomial like this. Does everybody understand where we're going? Okay, turn to page 17. I think so. No, not yet. Just wait till I've done a few. Okay, number 1, factoring trinomials. The first thing that you should do is identify your a, b, and c. What is your a? 6. What is your b? And what is your c? Correct. Now, normally we would see that that's a 6, so we would try to divide everything by 6. But is that going to work out? No, because 25 divided by 6 is a decimal, and so is 14 divided by 6. So since you cannot do it by a GCF, I'm about to teach you a new way to do it. You know how normally we multiply to whatever your c value is, which is 14? Well, when your a value is not 1 and you can't factor it out, you multiply your c value by your a value. What is 14 times 6? You have calculators. Right. So we're now trying to multiply to get 84. And we're still adding to get the b value of negative 25. So what are some numbers that multiply to make an 84 and add to make a negative 25? If you're not sure, you see that 84 is even, so just start dividing by even numbers like 2, 4, 6, and okay, 21 and 4, and then, 21 and 4, and then they both need to be negative so that they'll add to a negative 25 but multiply to a positive 84. Everybody still with me? So let me go over where this 84 came from. Since your a is not a 1, you can't just simply multiply to get 14 and add to get negative 25, because that would just be ignoring this a value of 6. The only reason we were able to ignore the a value before is because it was a 1. But now that it's 6 and you can't divide it out of all three terms, you multiply it by your C value, which is where the 84 came from. Now you put those in binomials just like before, so that'd be an n minus 21 and an n minus 4. But we can't stop there, okay, because look at the board a second. The reason we can't stop there is because if I were to multiply these two binomials now, is n times n going to produce a 6n squared? No, so there's more to it. Once you have the numbers, you now divide both of them by your a value, which is 6 for this problem. At that point, you reduce both of those fractions. What will 21 over 6 reduce to? Okay, but as a fraction. Okay, let's talk about how to reduce if you can't do it in your head. Alpha y equals n over d, because it's a fraction. And what fraction am I trying to reduce? 21 over what? 6. So type in 21 over 6, hit enter, and it will reduce it for you to 7 over 2. So now reduce 4 over 6. Not always. Okay, what will 4 over 6 reduce to? 2 over 3. Okay, so let me recap what I've done so far. Does everybody know how I got the n minus 21 and n minus 4? Well, you're not paying attention, that's why. Okay, then you divide by the a value, which is 6. At that point, you reduce those fractions. 21 over 6 became 7 over 2. 4 over 6 became 2 over 3. Since they will not reduce to whole numbers, you now take the denominators from each one and move them out to the front. Like that 2 will now be beside the n, and it's 2n minus 7. The 3 will now move beside this n and become 3n minus 2. And then that is the final answer. Okay, write that down, and then I will show you why that is the final answer. Somebody a long time ago. Okay, yes. Okay, the more we get done in class together, the less you will have for homework, though. All right, let's go to number 2. Yes. Okay, here we go. What is the a value? What is the b value? What is the c value? 2. Can the a value of 6 be divided out of all three terms? No, which means it's not a greatest common factor for this problem, and we have to use our new method where we multiply to get what? 12. Because since a is not going anywhere, since you can't factor it out, you multiply it by the c value, which is 2, and that becomes 12. And then you're still adding just to get your b, which is 7. What numbers will do that? Okay, 4 times 3 is 12. 4 plus 3 is 7. So now you'll write them in binomials. That's v plus 4, v plus 3. But that cannot be the final answer, because look up at the board for a second. The reason this cannot be the final answer is because if I were to stop and double distribute right now, is v times v going to produce 6v squared? And is 4 times 3 going to give me a 2? No. So that's why there's more steps. You have to divide both of them by 6. And now you reduce each of those fractions. Yes, you go to the calculator, you hit alpha y equals n over d, and then you just type in the fraction that you're trying to reduce, and then you hit enter. So 4 over 6 will reduce to what? 2/3. And 3 over 6 will reduce to 1/2. Now that you've reduced them, you take the bottom of each fraction and you move it out as the coefficient of v. It is now the coefficient of v, so 3v plus 2. 2 becomes the coefficient of that v, so 2v plus 1. Now if I took the time to double distribute those two, look, 3v times 2v is 6v squared. 2 times 1 is 2. And when you do the outer terms, you get a 3v. When you do the inner terms, you get a 4v. And combined, that would make a 7v. So that is the final answer. Where'd my green go? Oh, Hulk. I thought you said hawk too. I'm thinking, aren't they like red and something? Okay, are y'all finished? You finished? Okay, number 3. Okay, number 3. What is the A value? 6. What is the B value? Negative 19. And what is the C value? Negative 7. Now, the first thing you should always check so that you don't waste a lot of time is, will the A value divide out of all 3 terms? No. It'll divide out of 6 because that would make a 1. But 19 divided by 6 would be a fraction, and so would 7 over 6. So this is one of the new kinds where you have to multiply to get the A times C, which is a negative 42. And you have to add to get the B value, which is negative 19. So what numbers will do that? Where'd I get what? A negative 42? The A value times the C value. Since you couldn't factor that out, you can't just ignore it. You multiply it by the C, and that's your new number to multiply to. Okay, what numbers will do it? 21 and 2? Right, negative 21 and positive 2. We'll multiply to negative 42, and they will add to negative 19. So you would write them in factors as n minus 21, n plus 2. But that cannot be your final answer, because if you were to stop and multiply that now, n times n is not 6n squared. That's why you now have to divide both of them by the A value of 6. And then you reduce. If you don't know how to reduce in your head, then you use the calculator. Alpha y equals n over d. What will 21 over 6 reduce to? Both of them are divisible by what number? 3. 21 divided by 3 is 7. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So over here, 2 and 6 are both divisible by what number? 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. That's how you do it in your head. But if you can't do that, use alpha y equals n over d. Now that you have reduced both, the bottom number becomes your coefficient of n. So 2n minus 7 and 3n plus 1. And now if you were to take the time to multiply, 2n times 3n is 6n squared. Negative 7 times 1 is negative 7. The outer terms make a 2n. The inner terms make a negative 21n, which combines to a negative 19n. Okay, y'all. Okay, hold on, Travis. B is negative 5 and C is negative 21. Okay, Travis. Okay, the first thing you should do is what, Travis? That it can't. Right? And that's what you're multiplying to get. Negative 5, yeah. Okay, what numbers will do that? Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, how do they figure out those numbers? They're no smarter than you. They just sit here with their calculator and type in 126 divided by 2, 126 divided by 3 until they find the numbers. Yes. Guys, that's what I have to do too. I can't just sit here and think of numbers that multiply to 126. I take my calculator and I start dividing it by numbers until another number pops up and I say, oh, those two numbers will make a 5. That's what I even have to do on some of these larger numbers. Okay, look, Marcus, if you're having trouble figuring out numbers that multiply to 126, you say 126 divided by 2. And you say, okay, will 2 and 63 make a 5? Nope. So 126 divided by 3. Will 3 and 42 make a 5? Nope. 126 divided by 4. Oops. Well, that's a decimal, so that's a definite no. 126. I'm not going to do it divided by 5 because I know by common sense that number is not divisible by 5. So then I go by 6. Will 6 and 21 make a 5? No. So 126, I'm thinking it's not divisible by 7, so I'm going to skip it and go to 8. That's a decimal, so that doesn't work. 126 divided by, it's probably not divisible by 9 or 10, and not 11, so 12. That's a decimal. Oh, I skipped it. Oops. Yeah, so maybe don't skip numbers unless you know for sure. Look, 9 and 14 are 5 units apart, so those are your numbers. Now, that didn't take me very long, and my calculator's slower. Like, it takes me longer to click than it does for y'all. Y'all could type those all in a matter of 30 seconds or less. Okay, so our factors are x minus 14 and x plus 9. But those are not the final factors because why? Well, yeah, but why is this not the final answer? Correct. X times x is not 6x squared. So that's why at this point you need to divide by the a value, which is 6. Then what do you do? Shh, pay attention. You reduce. Three over 2. And then what do you do? Right? Okay. Plus 3. And that is your final answer because now if you distributed those together, it would make this trinomial. Okay, now let's try number 5 together. Yes, Drake? What? Okay, well, let's do it together. 5 is actually easy. It ends up easier, which is probably why you're confused. Okay, number 5. What is the a value? 4. What is the b value? Negative 11. And what is the c value? 6. Can you divide 4 by all of these? No. 11 divided by 4 would not work, and 6 divided by 4 would be a decimal also. So this is one of those new problems where you have to multiply your a times your c and get 24, and then you have to add to get negative 11. What numbers will multiply to a positive 24 and add to a negative 11? Negative 8 and negative 3. So n minus 8, n minus 3. But now what do we have to do? Divide by 4. Divide by 4. What will that 8 over 4 reduce to? A 2. So think about it. There's nothing to kick out front because if you did, it would just be a 1, right? 2 over 1. And then over here, will this one reduce? No. So you're ready to go ahead and kick the 4 to the front and get 4n minus 3, and then you're done. Yep, because look, n times 4n is 4n squared. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. N times negative 3 is negative 3n. That makes a negative 8n, and negative 3 and negative 8 make a negative 11. Okay, let's try one more, and then that way you only have 4 for homework. Okay, we ready? Guys, there's a reason some of you do not understand this, and it's because you don't pay attention. And you're never going to understand it unless you start to pay attention. Okay, what's the a value? Is it a number that you can divide all 3 terms by? No. So we got to use this new method where we multiply the a times c and get 6. So we're multiplying to get 6 and we're adding to get negative 7. What numbers will do that? Negative 6, negative 1. So my factors to start are a b minus 6 and a b minus 1. Now what do we do? Divide it by your a value, which is 6. This person who created this worksheet must have liked 6, but a value is not always going to be 6. Shh, what? What? They like 6? Oh. Okay. Okay. B minus what? 1. Doesn't that reduce to a 1? And then will 1 over 6 reduce at all? No, so you kick the 6 to the front and get 6b minus 1. You need to do the remaining 4 for homework.